We're recording. Thanks. All right, everybody, welcome. Good morning, and we're so happy to have you here. This is an information session on writing Molecular Foundry user proposals. I'm Shannon Sisson, I'm the user program director, and we have a number of panelists with us as well. We have Carolyn Sutterfella, Steve Whitelem, Beihang Yu, and Ellen Robertson, and they are representing perspectives of Foundry scientific staff, Foundry users, and Foundry proposal reviewer. So we are recording this session for future use, posted to our website. And first, I'm going to talk through a very quick introduction to what the Foundry is, because I think if you've found your way here, you maybe already have an idea that this might be an interesting resource for you. I'll go through some of the details about our proposal process, take a look at one example of a successful proposal that was submitted, and then we'll turn it over to the panelists. And I have some prompts for them, but I definitely welcome your questions as participants and audience members, current and prospective Foundry users, to really kind of pick their brains about how to be successful in this process. So the Molecular Foundry is located at Berkeley National Lab in Berkeley, California. We're one of 5 nanoscale science research centers funded by the U.S. Department of Energy. And these 5 centers are kind of geographically distributed across the United States, and we have related but maybe slightly different specialized expertise and instrumentation. We're considered a knowledge-based user facility, and that really emphasizes the fact that while we have instrumentation, sometimes really pushing the limits of what instrumentation can do, we also have a really fabulous collection of scientific and technical staff members who are here to work with you, to learn with you, to collaborate with you, and to really kind of go on your research journey with you. Sometimes that takes different forms, so that could be a very close collaboration over a very long time period, or it could be something where you kind of pop in and touch base with their expertise a little bit and then kind of move on your way, and we kind of welcome that range. And it is a multidisciplinary center. We're organized into 7 different facilities that have a little bit of different focus in terms of what they do technically. A lot of times when we tell this story, we start with our 3 synthetic facilities. So we have an inorganic nanostructures, biological nanostructures, and organic and macromolecular synthesis facilities. And these are really focusing on synthesizing new materials of interest, and there are some kind of related characterization tools in those facilities as well. However, we also have 2 facilities that focus pretty deeply in characterization of nanoscale materials, and those are the Imaging and Manipulation of Nanostructure facility and the National Center for Electron Microscopy, which is TEM and other related capabilities. We also have a nanofabrication facility with a clean room, and advanced thin film and lithography tools. And we have a theory facility as well, where our scientists are kind of trying to understand principles, behaviors of materials at the nanoscale. So what's nice about having these all kind of together as part of this multidisciplinary user facility and then being co-located in 2 buildings together is that during the course of your experiments or your research work, you can take advantage of capabilities from multiple facilities. So there's always kind of 1 facility per proposal that's your lead facility, which is more or less kind of the center of mass of the work that you're doing. But then you can draw on capabilities from other facilities as well. And a lot of times our scientific and technical staff can help you to be aware of what are complementary techniques or capabilities across the facilities. Here's a little bit about who we serve with our user program. So we have around 1,000 users. So those are researchers that take advantage of the capabilities and expertise that we have to offer. And they range from PIs, students, postdocs, people from industry, and are distributed. So we definitely have a lot of users from California. California's a big state, it's a populous state, but we are really proud to serve people across the US and then even outside of the US. So in the most recent fiscal year, we served people from 31 states and 25 countries. That included 36 companies. So some of you here might be representing industry. Mostly that's small business companies. So our typical mode is for free access for researchers. And that's when researchers are doing work with intent to publish. So we call that non-proprietary access. That gives you access to the collaboration and intellectual resources of our facility staff. But if you are working in a different phase of your research and development arc, and you have intellectual property that you want to protect or do not want to share with co-inventors here at the lab, there is a full cost recovery option, which is currently at $325 per hour. So a lot of times we're working with small businesses that are kind of in that exploratory phase. It's sort of a pre-commercialization moment for them. And let's see, we have around 400 publications per year. Around half of those are high impact. And we serve people from 190 different institutions last year. So I want to switch talking a little bit, moving closer to the proposal writing piece, which is what brought you all here. So our user program, we strive to have a fair and transparent user proposal review process. And we want to minimize barriers for access for new and returning users. And we want to be responsive to user needs and demands. And I think that one of the reasons I love working here is because people are really invested in this model, love working with users, are super collaborative, and it really brings a lot of intellectual energy and life to the work here. Our user proposals come in, our standard proposals are accepted twice a year. So there's a fall call and a spring call. So we're heading into the fall proposal call time. So that window opens March 1st, and then proposals have to be submitted by March 30th. And our standard proposal grants 1 year of access for a project that has one lead facility and may have none to several support facilities as well. And these proposals are around 3 pages. So we have an online portal where you enter information into our different prompts, and some of that's information about your institution and your researchers, so that we can know who you are and get in contact with you and establish a user contract. But then most of it is kind of the technical section of your proposal, which we'll look at, where you describe what your goals are and what resources you need. These proposals go on to a review process that's similar to what you'd find in National Science Foundation or National Institutes of Health, where we have folks who are external to the Foundry that do review. So we'll look at the criteria that they look at and score your proposals on, and so you can be aware of what those criteria are. Let's see. Yeah, projects are 1 year long. Follow-on proposals are encouraged. So we get a lot of these users that come, they do some work, they're happy, and then they want to continue accessing our resources, and that is absolutely welcome. We don't have, I guess some other user facilities have sort of like a semi-automatic extension option. We don't have that. If you complete your first year and you want to continue working, you recompete by submitting a new user proposal to extend that work. Right, and it's free for non-proprietary research intended to publish, and intellectual property that may be developed during the course of a user project is owned by the inventor or inventors. So if during the course of your project you discover that you've made an invention, then there's a follow-up conversation with folks here at the lab to figure out who are the inventors. Is that a sole inventor or a joint inventor project that moves forward? And we have folks here in our intellectual property office that can support that process. This is looking at the proposal review process. So proposals get submitted by March 30th. We do a quick administrative review. So this screens to make sure people are eligible to access the Foundry. So there are some U.S. government regulations about nations of origin, but almost all countries would be welcome. And there's a list if you're interested in going into what those are. And we look to make sure it's complete. So have you completed all the sections? Do you have all your attachments? Are your figures showing properly? And so on. Once it passes that review stage, it goes on to our scientific and technical staff for a technical feasibility. So they're looking to see, have you articulated what you need? Are you asking for resources that we have? Is this something that's technically feasible for us? And so, almost all proposals are making it through this process, or if there's a revision that's needed, we would kick it back to you and give you 48 hours to respond with that revision. Then it goes out for review to our reviewers. So we have in total around 50 to 60 reviewers that look at our 250 or so proposals that come in. They're segmented into different groups related to the technical facilities. And reviewers will look at multiple proposals, and multiple reviewers will look at each proposal, and they'll discuss them as a team to come up with a final ranking. So they do kind of a preliminary review where they write some comments and scores, then they come together. So we do host this on site, but people do have a hybrid participation option if they prefer to attend virtually, where reviewers discuss these with each other. So kind of a normalization of the scoring, talking through, any points of confusion or different perspectives that our reviewers have. And we love that they have complementary perspectives on these, and finally come up with a ranking. The ranking is set kind of according to a bin that has to do with which resources you're requesting. So once we have a ranked list and scores related to each of those bins, then those go forward to our facility directors. So we have a scientific staff person that's a director of each of our 7 technical facilities, and they do a capacity cutoff. So for each bin, they make a determination about how many proposals can be accepted for that bin. And we don't do kind of a specific hourly accounting the way maybe a beamline would. And so there's kind of a process of looking at each proposal and making a judgment call on how much each of those proposals is asking for, and then comparing that to how many proposals are already accepted and in the pipeline to how many we can take. So some proposals are approved. We notify users around mid-May, so 15, 16, 17, right around there, whether the proposal is accepted or not. Then it goes forward to 2 parallel processes. One is that the users submit more detailed information about the safety details, so which materials are they using, those sorts of things, and that gets reviewed. And then also we check to make sure that there's a contract. So Berkeley Lab has to have a user agreement, a contract in place with the user's home facility before the work can begin. And the user agreement discusses intellectual property rights details, but also very importantly, it has details related to safety liability. So we want to make sure that people are working safely and have the appropriate coverage. And then projects could begin. One thing that's not formally part of this process, but I really want to encourage is before you submit a proposal, you are welcome to consult with our staff. So this is optional, but a lot of people talk about how really helpful and impactful it is to refining their proposals. So you can find a list of our staff and their expertise and the instrumentation that they're associated with on our website. And you can get a feel for who might be a good staff person to talk through your proposal with you, maybe give it a look before you submit it. I think this really helps refine the scope for a lot of users and leads to better outcomes through the process. This is just a quick view of where our proposals are coming from, in case you're curious about that. So in the 289 standard proposals we received in fall 2022, we received some proposals from Berkeley Lab, so either from the Molecular Foundry PIs or from other PIs at Berkeley Lab, a few from other national labs, and then we have a pretty healthy number from US industry or from international foreign organizations. We have many from our neighbors down the hill at UC Berkeley, and around 28% come from other US academic institutions spread across the country. Right. Within that 2 to 3 page proposal that you're going to submit, there are kind of 4 main technical sections that you will fill out. One is your project goals and significance. So what's the motivation for your project? What are your long-term goals? It kind of sets the context for the 1-year project that you want to do here with us. A project plan and timeline. So you're describing what you want to do. And a lot of times really pretty good detailed project plans are super helpful. I see with our reviewers a lot that when there's not a clear description of what work you want to do, or if it's vague, or if it's not scoped well, if it's maybe overly ambitious or describing a 2 or 3 year project in this timeline, but when you have a year actually for the work, that can lead to problems with proposals moving forward. So you want to give a nice detailed plan here. A resource request. So you want to describe what you want to use at the Foundry. This is also really important for getting through that technical feasibility step. We want to know which resources you want to access, which expertise is important to your project, and then kind of also how does it fit in with what you have in your home institution. And then there's a relevant experience section where you can talk about which researchers that are working on the project, what do they work on? Do they have training on relevant equipment? What's their expertise so that we can understand what you're bringing to the project as well. And here are the proposal review criteria with prompts that the reviewers consider when they are scoring it. So is this likely to be an impactful science question? Is this scoped well in terms of timeline? How does it relate to the work going on at the home institution? Does this resource request, does it take advantage of things that the Foundry offers? And what's the preparation of the users? And I see a question. So the question is, do you require institutional affiliation for the proposals? For example, if I'm planning to perform proof of concept for my own startup, would that require an institutional affiliation? Thanks for the question. Every user has to be associated with a home institution to be able to work at the Foundry, but that home institution could be a startup. So that is fine. An LLC, for example, would be fine. So as long as you've got a home institution that can legally enter into a contract with Berkeley Lab, you're good to go. So yeah, okay, great. So I see confirmation that was clarified that. Okay, and the last thing that I kind of want to do, almost last thing that I want to do before I pass it over to our panelists is to show you an example proposal. So just to help you get a sense for what those look like. So let me switch my screen share here to show you one. So we do have a number of example proposals on our website. So there's a Foundry tips, proposal tips and examples section within our proposal guide. So I encourage you to look at multiple examples. Here's just one. So you can see this is kind of the technical section of the proposal. So not too super long. We've got I think this one's around 4 pages. So a lot of it is kind of general, proposal good practice, right? So this is one on atomic scale optical and electronic properties for engineered quantum emitters and 2D transition metal dialkyl. So in the project goals and significance, they kind of frame it. Here's this major challenge that we're working on. They narrow it down to this is the class of materials that we are working with, and that's important. You need to know what materials you're planning to work with. And then we've got sort of this direct, clear statement of the intended work. They do reference which group they want to work with, and they talk about prior work that they've done, right? So there's sort of like this Pac-Man shape that you write when you have a proposal, right? So here's, within this circle of motivation or this scientific idea that we want to explore, here's other work that's happened, and here's why we still need to do this work, right? And then you say, and therefore we're going to do this work, and it's going to be impactful. So we like to see that too. That makes a persuasive argument. Here they reference which group they want to work with. So they specifically mentioned the Weber-Bargioni group and the expertise there. They go on to describe, like, we're going to use these specific approaches. So we know what project they're working on, why it's important, which class of materials they're working on, who they want to work with, and what approaches they want to use, right? So that's setting them up to be persuasive here to our reviewers. This proposal also includes some figures. So figures that are clear, they're relevant, and that have kind of support an intuitive understanding of the work for our reviewers can be really effective. So that you want to be connected to the text. This is showing, kind of explaining, what they're planning to do. There's this need for the Foundry section. It highlights the fact that we are going to use unique capabilities, which facilities, the fact there's synergy among the facilities. So it's really making the case that the Foundry is the best place to do this work. So there's a description of what they want to use here at the Foundry. There is a section where you kind of type in which facilities are requested and what you want to do there. So here, imaging and manipulation is the lead facility, and inorganic is called on as a support facility. And here's our project plan and timeline. So you can see it's pretty detailed, where they're describing what things are going to happen at their home institution, which is blacked out here for their privacy, and which things are happening at the Foundry, and how long we think these things are going to take, right? So we're trying to describe 1 year of access. We're trying to describe interplay between the Foundry resources and the home institution resources. So here we find those details. Okay, and then the last section here is this relevant experience. So we have some details about, what's the expertise of the researchers, what are they trained to do, how are they going to contribute to this project. Training is an important part of what happens here as a user facility. It's also something that takes a fair bit of time. So being aware of what the prior training is helps to make decisions about allocation of resources to how many groups, right? Because when they determine the capacity cutoff, it helps to know. And there are references here, so you might not be sure if that's something that's included in the Foundry proposal. It is. It lends credibility. It shows you understand the field where you're working, and then perhaps shows work that you've done as well. Okay. We're just going to switch back to the other view here. All right, last bits for me, and then we're going to turn it over to our our panelists. I want to quickly let you know we have some other proposal types. This is a standard proposal that I showed. That's kind of our bread and butter. But we also have sample-only proposals where you can request a sample of material that the Foundry has made. You can submit that anytime, any day of the year. We have instrument-only proposals, which request access to 1 or 2 instruments. And this is really instruments where they have time available and you have some training. So this is for 6 months of access. And you can only submit that outside of our high time where we're looking at standard proposals. And rapid access proposals, this is kind of so you can get quick access in between the standard proposal call. So it only bridges you to the next standard proposal call window. So those can be submitted through Tuesday, and then as of Wednesday of next week, on the 1st, when the standard call opens, we won't accept those anymore. New this round, we were bringing back some travel grants. So in case this applies to any of you, if you're more than 150 miles from Berkeley Lab and at a U.S. institution that's either in one of these categories, EPSCoR, minority serving, or what the Department of Energy calls emerging research institution, and that has to do with a funding threshold, and you can find more information on our website to link on that to see those lists. You could be eligible to get $2,000 to offset travel costs to come to the Molecular Foundry. And it's a very short form that's submitted as part of the proposal process, and will notify people who are awarded around 2 weeks after the proposal outcomes come out. All right, so with that, I'm super excited to introduce our panelists and let them field your questions. So we have Dr. Carolyn Setterfella, who's a staff scientist in the inorganic facility. We have Dr. Steve Whitelum from our theory facility. We have Professor Ellen Robertson, who's a reviewer on our biological facility review board. And we have Dr. Beihang Yu, who is a user in our nanofabrication facility. I have a little bit of inspiration here for the panel to think about, what makes a proposal good? What do the different persons look for, PRB members, staff members, and then from the user perspective, do you have tips about, what's helpful in writing the proposal, or how do you work with feedback, and so on. So I'm going to stop sharing so that we can all see each other a little bit more. And panelists, I think you all have your videos on, so you want to give a quick wave there. Thanks. And so I'm going to turn it over to you. Carolyn, do you want to get us started with a few thoughts you have on tips to be successful?
Yes, sure. Welcome, everybody. I think a very good start, if you think about submitting a Foundry proposal, is really having a conversation. And you can contact basically any staff as closely related as what you plan to do, and you will find this information on our website, or you heard about it on a conference. So this could be also a good connection point. And just call them up and talk to them, because even if you have your idea and research plans set, this can help you actually to refine it or maybe add additional aspects to that research question, because you didn't know, or it is not as specified or detailed on the instrument website of the Foundry what we can do, but it can easily come up in a conversation. If you explain what you want to do, and then we will ask questions into certain directions. Have you thought of this? Because we know, of course, better what we have. So we could add additional angles or perspectives to your research project and basically shape the idea more. So it makes sense to get into conversation before you start the writing, because this conversation can change your idea a little bit or shape it more or make it more concrete, which is very helpful for the reviewers.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. Steve, do you have anything you want to add from that?
Yeah, for sure. I'd agree with everything Carolyn just said. Also, just want to add, so I'm in the theory facility, and maybe the question I get asked most frequently is, what does it mean to have a user proposal in a theory facility? Because often this is, sort of unfamiliar to people who are used to coming in and working with a beamline or an instrument or something like that. So I'd say, think of it as like a formalized collaboration. So our aim is to sort of work with you in collaboration to help you do what you're interested in, and also what we're interested in. And having a conversation in advance is a really good way of figuring out, like, if we have the expertise to help you. I'd say perhaps the most sort of unfortunate thing we see from time to time in theory is what I'd call the supersize me proposal, where somebody's come in with an experimental plan and has sort of decided at the end of that, oh, I'd like some theory with this, please. Like, sometimes unspecified theory. So those are both hard to review, but also a bit of a missed opportunity, because sometimes it seems there might be scope for a collaboration, but we never really get around to talking to the user after they come in to make a plan. So don't hesitate to get in touch with us as you're putting together your user proposal. So broadly speaking, we work on both quantum mechanics and classical mechanics in the theory facility. We've got a pretty broad range of expertise. We don't do everything, but if you have a chat with us, you might find that there's something we can help with. So a conversation is always really helpful. And one other thing to bear in mind is that, unlike some of the user facilities, we don't give out just computer time as part of a theory proposal. Instead, we prefer to work more closely in collaboration with our users. And that could be like a really in-depth, let's make a model of this experimental system and study it for a year kind of thing, or it could be a much more focused calculation. So there's a sort of range of options in theory, and the best way to figure out what you're interested in is just approach us, and we'll try and figure out the best staff member to talk to you.
Thanks, Steve. And Carolyn and Steve, do you have advice for folks on what's the best way to reach out to one of our scientists?
Email is pretty good, I think. Have a look at the webpage, the Foundry Theory webpage, if you're sort of unsure of what we do, and then just email us. And there are 4 staff members in the theory facility. So Sinead Griffin, Liang Tang, David Prendergast, and myself. And we'll try and figure out like who the right person to talk to is, but email is a good way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Even if you can't find the right contact, you can contact whoever is maybe close to what you plan to do, and then we will guide you through the Foundry and find the right people, one or several, to talk to.
For sure.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and I think at the Foundry user office, sometimes we get people reach out to us sometimes too if they're not sure which scientific or technical staff person, and we're happy to try to help, get you closer to the right person too. Thanks. Ellen, do you have any insights from the reviewer end of things?
I just got a phone call, but I'm gonna let it there. Sorry. Yeah, so I review proposals that come into the bio facility, and I would say that all reviewers look at the criteria very carefully, the 4 that Shannon listed before. And I think Shannon already made some really good points about what exactly we look for. One thing that's really important is we consider, will the research lead to publications, because that's really important. Specificity in the timeline is very important as well. We really consider, can the research be carried out within a 1-year window? And we look to see exactly what parts are being performed at the Foundry versus what parts are being performed at the Home Institute. And then we also look to see what are the researchers going to do, once the year is over, what they're going to do at their home institution. Another thing that has come up a few times when we're reviewing is we often get follow-on proposals. So a user will have submitted a proposal and will have done the work at the Foundry, and then they want to extend it to do more work, so they submit the follow-on proposal. And the users are supposed to submit a report detailing what they have done, and that's something we don't always see. So that's a comment we make, is that if you're going to submit a follow-on, make sure you do the report that is required. And then we can also go back to the previous proposal and kind of see if the extension makes sense or not. But I guess, like, in summary, the key thing is just to be very clear about what facilities you're using and why, and very clear that you can do the research in the 1-year time frame, and that it's very likely that it will lead to publications.
Thanks, Ellen. And Beihang, you've been through this from the user end of things. Do you have any insights you want to share with folks about that process of getting a good proposal together, or maybe working with feedback on your proposal?
Yeah, I guess from a user perspective, I actually want to add on to the first point about like talking to staff members as you're preparing the proposal. Especially, I work closely with the nanofabrication facility, and for us, I guess the nanofab facility, it could be a little bit different from other floors. So besides, we have the clean room capability, and the staff member there also has all kinds of expertise in nanofab. So for like being a user, so like I submit user proposals myself, although I'm a Foundry postdoc. And I also work with other users on like collaborative proposals. So for like types of proposal for nanofab, I really see how talking to staff member can help to shape your project, and also at the same time discover what are the capabilities we have here. Also, oftentimes for a lot of people that want to work with nanofab facility, they actually kind of don't have a huge expertise in nanofab, and they want to use Foundry to kind of leverage the nanofab part to enable their project. So for these type of things, I find this being extremely useful to talk to staff members. So we will have meetings with staff member. We think that would help us then discuss what the possible like nanofabrication workflow we can implement to make things possible. So I think that's where we got most of the feedback on how we want to write the proposal, how we want to propose things. So I think that's been extremely helpful before we submit the proposal.
Maybe I can quickly add to that. I think these are really good points. We will find out the opportunities, but we will also find out the limitations. So for example, nanofab or any synthesis facilities, there may be concerns about cross-contamination. So we will figure out in these discussions, is the experiment possible? Even if your material is like in a material class that we work on or we have tools for, maybe there are concerns about cross-contamination with certain elements. So we would figure that out as well before a proposal goes through and you arrive, and then we say, oh, by the way, no, we are not working with this toxic gas before this and because of this and that reason. So this will also be really important to figure out what are actually the limitations, maybe also with respect to available temperature range, dimensions, and chemical processes, reactions. This will be also important to discuss before, like these technical aspects.
Yeah, thanks. I want to open it up. We have time for users and prospective users who may be on the call to ask questions. You can raise your hand. You can put it in the chat. What questions do you have about the process? Any uncertainties? Oh, I think Danielle, we can't hear you, but it looks like you might be speaking. Can't hear you yet. Do you want to try the chat? Okay, thanks. Okay, there's a question. What is the timeline? All right, so let me grab my calendar here. So proposals. We open the proposal call March 1st. So that means you could start on a proposal in our user portal system as early as March 1st. But you have until March 30th, so that's a Thursday, to submit it. Between now and, I don't know, maybe March 21st or so is when I think it's a good time to have conversations with the staff about what the capabilities are. You don't want to wait until, you know, March 20 something to start having that conversation. Maybe it's, you know, having it then is better than not having, but just be aware that they're going to get a lot of volume in that last week before the proposal is submitted. So soon, I would say reach out. Proposals come in March 30th. The next couple of weeks are spent on the internal review. So that administrative review, to make sure they're complete and whole, the feasibility review by the lead and support facilities. And then on April 18th, the proposals go out to the reviewers. So then they've got, I guess that's just a little over 2 weeks to look at those proposals, make their comments and preliminary scores. They will meet on May 4th or May 5th, depending on which team they're part of. Have those conversations, submit a final ranking and scores by the end of that day. The next few days, those compiled scores go to the facility directors. There's a cutoff determination meeting on Tuesday, May 9th, where each facility director, among the rest of the facility directors and leadership team, talks through, this is our plan, kind of defends their choices there, and people have a chance to talk about that and question that. Then the results are communicated to people that want to work here between May 10th and 12th, actually. So submit by March 30th. By May 12th, you should know if it's accepted or not. That doesn't necessarily mean you can work on May 16th, though. So you'll have to submit your final safety form. That'll be reviewed. Those are usually reviewed batch-wise on Fridays. And we'll have to work on establishing the contract. Some of you might come from institutions where your institution already has a contract with Berkeley Lab, and that'll just be ready. And that'll be reflected in your proposal system after you get notification that it's accepted. There will be a line that says whether or not you have a contract. If not, our team will work as fast as we can to get a contract signed and countersigned so that you can begin your work. Sometimes that takes around a month. I've seen it happen as short as 1 week. Sometimes it takes a while, especially if we're working with, let's say, typically industrial partners that are trying to just, engage their legal counsel, make sure they understand what the intellectual property guidelines are, and so on. Sometimes those can take a little while and have a little back and forth. Sometimes working with international organizations can take a little longer, just because there are different structures, getting the right contact name for the contracts officer, getting on the same page about that could take more than a month. So submit a proposal by March 30th. Everything goes well, you could be here working as early as late May or June, but it's important to have a conversation with your assigned scientist. Every proposal gets an assigned scientist, which is your main contact point on the technical end here, to see when you can start. That's our timeline. We have a lot of questions. I love this. Okay. Aviram, I see your hand up. Do you want to ask your question?
Sure, I have like 2 quick questions. So first, is there any reason to submit like earlier in the period? Okay. Second question, you said that the proposals will be reviewed by like internal and external experts. So how much background should the writing be providing to make sure that people are all on the same page, right? Everybody's doing very specific research. So
Yeah, good question. So I'll frame it that the reviewers that look at your proposal at least are specialized within the expertise of that facility. So for example, there's there's one team of 7 or so people that reviews biological facility proposals. So they're at least in that, you know, envelope of biofacility. But Ellen, maybe can you comment on, like, as a reviewer, how, you know, how much background information you feel like you need?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I did my postdoc in the bio facility, working with the group that was using peptoids. So I get all the biopolymer ones. And so because I've had that experience working in the facility and I know about the peptoids, I have a pretty good grasp on the background. But I think, yeah, it is good to have some kind of general background, just because I'm not an expert in some of the other proposals that come into the bio facility. So you will have, you know, within the group of people reviewing the summary, some people that will probably know the research really, really well, but then others that maybe know it tangentially. So to have just a little bit of background to describe the science is good for folks that aren't necessarily complete experts in the research.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks. And next I'm going to hop over to Danielle's question. So she asked, for the project plan and timeline, how specific does it need to be? It's hard to know exactly when or how often I would need to use certain equipment at the Foundry because it depends on how other parts of the project goes. Sure. So I think, so I showed you that example where they're roughly estimating, you know, how many months this will take, how many months that will take. So you could do your best guess there. I think the conversations with the scientist ahead of time might help you get a sense for how, you know, how to set expectations for how long it takes, or, you know, in some facilities, there's a little bit more of a guideline of like, you know, this project gets, you know, 1 full day per month on this specific instrument, and then thered be plenty of time to, but others, it's more like, you know, a couple days a week, you can be here. Or Steve, you want to comment?
Yeah, just to emphasize what you said, and this links to a question a couple down in the chat. So as specific as possible, I'd say. So of course, it's not possible in all cases to, you know in advance what's going to happen, but just be as specific as possible, as detailed as you can. Because the question from Edward, are there common pitfalls you see in proposals that make them less likely to get accepted? I'd say it's lack of specificity. So the most common piece of feedback I get from our reviewers as to why a proposal didn't go through was they didn't have a concrete plan. So if you have a concrete plan, then it really helps everybody know what you plan to do, helps the reviewers know if what you're planning to do is feasible. So be as specific as possible. And of course, everybody understands that in research, you know, it might not work. You might have to change course. We understand that, but just if you come in with a really clear plan, that's very helpful for everyone. So do your best there.
Maybe I briefly add here, specific plan with request in the research question, but also with respect to the instruments you need. So you should not have a laundry list of 20 different things, because this we also don't like to see. It would require a lot of training, and the question is, does this really make sense? And we also want to see, goes back then to the complementarity. So maybe you can do some of those measurements in your home institute, and we should focus on our core expertise that we can add to what you can already do or have done.
Thanks. And next I want to go to Corey. You have your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, so kind of following up on that last point, recognizing to be as specific as possible in the proposal, is there some flexibility as to kind of where the results lead throughout the year? So let's say you're, 3 to 6 months in and you're getting kind of some input or direction that this technique might be worth trying, which you have available on the biostructures floor. Is it possible to then gain access to a piece of equipment during the actual time on site?
I can say that this varies a little bit. So as Steve mentioned, yeah, we all know there's some uncertainty in, just how the project will go. As far as adding additional capabilities or changing which capabilities you want to access, sometimes that depends on how committed those capabilities already are. And so sometimes it might mean you'll need to submit a proposal in the next round to formally request those. But sometimes there are capabilities that are available. So it's definitely worth asking, but I think you need to, yeah, just keep in mind that depending on how committed that specific resource already formally was, it could go some different ways. Yeah, anybody want to add to that, Beham?
Oh, yeah, I can add on that. Like based on what Shannon said, like how we do that in the cycle, in the like proposal period, if you want to add on the instrument. So the common way is that if you realize you need another piece of expertise or equipment in the Foundry, you talk to your assigned staff scientist to evaluate this together. Then you need to formally request the access to that instrument. If it's not originally in your proposal, then the other facility and the other staff scientists or technical staff, they will evaluate if it's possible to add you in based on their current availability. So there is a process you can do it. Then they will evaluate what Shannon just has said.
Thank you.
Thanks. I see a lot of questions. Let's see how many we can hop through here. So I saw one that came in. There's a direct question about living expenses. So how do people from far away typically fund their stays? And is there a best time of year that when housing is most available? It's good to be thinking about housing. There is some competition here because we're close to the university. For short stays, there is Berkeley Lab Guest House. So this is a hotel that is on site at the lab. And so it's a pretty reasonable rate. There are other hotels that are kind of in more like downtown Berkeley, which is honestly just a 5-minute ride down the hill. So like we can see the university campus from, looking out the window here. So there are other hotels down there as well. Some people go through like an Airbnb process, and so I saw summer was mentioned. Sometimes you can get sublets of apartment housing, but I don't want to mince words here. The housing is something you definitely need to think through and try to plan in advance, because it's a consideration. So we do have this new travel fund available for some people. Other times folks are using other kind of research grants and things to fund that. Let's see, what is the maximum duration in a 1-year period I could request for the access in my proposal? I'm not sure I understand the subtlety of this question. So 1-year proposal, so you do actually have a flexible start date, so you don't have to start right away on, say, June 1st. You could wait to January to start it if you wanted. Then once you start, then your clock starts and you've got a year to work. Depending on which resources you're trying to access, some of those would be like you get a day or two a month. Other of those are like, please be here 3 to 5 days a week, come on in. So it's sort of a more detailed conversation about just what resource you want. Those pre-conversations with the scientists can really help figure that out. Let's see if we can catch just a few more. How long does the results publications take time? Oh yeah. So publications, yes, there's always a lag between when you do your proposal work and when those publications come out. That's fine. Normal, you may have a year of access, start writing toward the end of that year, and then 6 months later as publisher or whatever it is. There's not a specific pressure on our end about when that publication comes out, although for everybody it's good if they flow. Okay, yeah, and there's a clarification. No difference between submitting on March 1st and March 30th. They don't get reviewed by the reviewers until the same date. So there's no kind of like rolling acceptance or anything. So they get reviewed as a batch, compared and ranked to one another after they're all in. Okay, I saw Jim answer that in chat. Thank you. Oh, I see a question about non-US persons. Okay. So how long does it take a badge for a non-US person? So there's a process by which people become affiliates. Berkeley Lab affiliates to access the site. There are 4 countries that right now cannot access the site. Those are North Korea, Iran, Cuba, and oh gosh, I should have written this down before I came. And we can follow up in a minute if you need. So if there's a person that has that as a nation of origin or is from an institution from one of those nations and is not a US citizen, they will not be allowed access. And we continually monitor those policies. So if in case there are any changes that open it up to more users, that we are aware of those. People from other nations go through kind of a standard process where you'd go through a review before you arrive. And then after you are approved at that level, you enter the US and then submit your entry documents to our international office. After you arrive, you submit the entry documents. There are a few days of reviewing those documents before you can get the badge. So it's just good to be aware of that. So we'd probably start your process. Let's say it takes a couple weeks, maybe between initiating that process to when you could enter. And then after you enter the US, a couple of days, roughly. Let's see. Is process of requesting new tools. The process of requesting new capabilities is a little bit case by case. So I see there's a question, does it matter which facility it's from? It does. So but those are conversations you can have, and it's kind of a case by case basis depending on the resource availability. Let's see. So I see Dijang's question. Yes, you can submit a proposal that requests capabilities from multiple facilities. So if you want kind of a more intensive capability from one facility and something a little bit less intensive from an additional facility, that could be a support facility request. But sometimes if what you're asking is pretty substantial from multiple facilities, we might actually generate for you or ask you to submit a second proposal. So that's a kind of a co-lead proposal or two proposals so that they can be evaluated for that. After 1 year of project, you would submit a follow-on proposal if you want to go past that 1 year. Oh, thank you. I see Mary sent me a message. It's Syria, Iran, North Korea, and Cuba that are on the SST list, where that would be a hard no for now. Okay. We're getting really close to the hour. So I want to thank you panelists for joining us. Thank you to everybody who joined the call to ask these questions. We would love to have additional conversations with you. We look forward to receiving your proposals. So please reach out. I promise it's a friendly, collaborative bunch. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.